So are they giving up in Minneapolis? ICE is just going to turn tail and run? That's not the story at all. Don't let them in any way convince you of that. I'm Tony Katz. The show is Tony Katz Today. The radio show has begun. Why don't we do the same? Let's go. Let's go.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue to the next week. We have a lot of work to do across this country to remove public safety risk who shouldn't even be in this country, and to deliver on President Trump's promise for strong border security and mass deportation. Law enforcement officers drawing down from this surge operation will either return to the duty stations or be assigned elsewhere to achieve just that.
That is Tom Homan. He is the border czar. He came in to relieve Greg Boven. Can't remember his last name right now. And he has announced that ICE in Minneapolis will be drawing down. You notice he didn't say leaving altogether. And there is a real mistake happening out there as this announcement came earlier that, oh my gosh, ICE is just leaving. ICE is not just leaving. But if the determination is made that since you have local law enforcement now actually doing their job and helping, you didn't need Border Patrol, now you can do it with less ICE agents, I say good. The story here, the one that the Republican Party will not be able to tell because of, I don't know, incompetence or fear, is that once you have local law enforcement working with to assist ICE, everything works better. Once you eliminate the violent agitator trying to kill ICE agents, everything works out better, and people don't get killed. People don't get attacked. People don't get hurt. When you have no violence towards ICE, but gosh, everything's normal. What's so wrong with normal? Tony Katz Today. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Find everything I do over there at, what is it? That's it, TonyKatz.com. Just that easy to do. It's unbelievable that people haven't noticed that for the past couple of weeks, everything's been, pretty easy. People have not been screaming and yelling. There have been no attacks. There was something that did take place yesterday. I do agree. But we were talking about this. Now we have nothing. Now there is no discussion. Now it's just, I guess this is what happens when everybody acts normal, which is what indeed took place. What took place was that Homan came in and allowed the temperature to come down because everybody was upset with the guy from Border Patrol. He was doing this and he was doing that. Bovino, I said Greg Bovino. And maybe his temperament wasn't right for this thing. It's right for other things. But in either case, you wanted to put a fresh face on it. He didn't stop. ICE continued to work. ICE continued to remove people. And so it should have. And in the press conference today, Tom Homan said as much.
We will continue to enforce Title 8 immigration law throughout this nation. Prioritizing national security threats and public safety risks makes sense. But I'll continue to say over and over again, if you are here in the country legally, you're not exempt from our immigration laws. If we encounter you, we'll take appropriate enforcement action. For those that say we are backing down from immigration enforcement or the promise of mass deportations, you are simply wrong. Look at the data. Record number of arrests and deportations, and we'll continue that effort. Prioritizing public safety threats and national security threats doesn't mean we'll forget about everybody else. We will take action on everybody else. That's just a stone cold fact.
I'll take a stone cold fact. By the way, I'm going to need that there, producer Landon. That's going to become a sound effect. That's just a stone cold fact. I only hope it's a stone cold fact that we will continue to look into all of the fraud committed by Somali nationals and Americans regarding home health care and Medicare services. People need to go to jail. I don't want that to end, and I am not letting the governor, Tim Walz, off the hook. Tim Walz is only concerned that he gets paid. You think I'm kidding? How in the world could I make something like this up?
What I am going to challenge as we get ready to start here in a few days, the legislative session, this legislative session needs to be about recovery of the damage that's been done to us. I am also asking our team, and I'm going to make appeals to our federal delegation. The federal government needs to pay for what they broke here.
The federal government needs to pay for what they broke here. I don't actually know what to do with that, except say broke what? Broke what? The citizens that created the blockades, let them pay for it. The citizens that destroyed property, let them pay for it. The people here illegally who created blockades and destroyed property, let's just throw them out of the country. Good Lord, indeed. I think everybody can take this as politically as they choose. And they will. The left will say their things and the right will say their things. I'm certainly a conservative. If you call me on the political right, I have no problem with it whatsoever. But I will state that I think the larger scale story here is look what happens when local law enforcement is allowed to do its job. Remember, it is not the Minneapolis cop who refused to work with ICE. It is the mayor, Jacob Frey, who refused to work with ICE. It is the governor, Tim Walz, who refused to work with ICE. That led to bringing in Border Patrol to act as an assistant because they were getting no backup from local. And when they got backup from local, things got better. What do you know about that? Now, maybe it didn't get better. It's just media stopped covering the story. If the locals are going to work with them, then you're going to be admitting that Jacob Frey and Tim Walz worked with ICE. And since progressives can't have that, best not to tell the story at all. That doesn't change what happened with Keith Ellison on the stand. Keith Ellison is the Attorney General of Minnesota. And the Senate is having a hearing, immigration enforcement oversight. And Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, he's got what we call in the business questions.
We had a very interesting hearing last week on the fraud in Minnesota, and we had State Senator Mark Cron. And in his testimony, he was talking about local reports of something like 30,000, they call them observers, being trained. Okay, I thought that was an incredible figure. I'm not saying there actually were, but it certainly sounds that there are activists being trained. Are you aware of training for activists, Mr. Ellison, in Minnesota? That some of these protesters literally went through training. There are groups out there providing training. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. I mean, it's common for people to use their First Amendment right to protest things that they don't believe are right.
Were you aware of the
First Amendment activity, sir?
Yeah. Were you aware of the signal chats? I believe it was the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota was actually helping manage one of those signal chats that were deploying those trained activists to the legal law enforcement actions. Or were you aware of that signal chat that was being used to deploy those people?
I'm aware it exists, but this is First Amendment activity, sir.
Oh, Attorney General Ellison. That's adorable. Paid agitators involved in impeding and interrupting ICE and engaging violence against ICE. That's something. That is something indeed. The story here is not whether or not people organized. It's whether or not they're paid to organize, whether or not there's dollars behind the organization. That's the question. That's the entirety of the argument. Who is paying to engage in this disruption? Who is paying to create these concerted groups, this concerted attack? Who's doing that? That's the question. Now, I put forth to you that these groups are anti-American. These groups are violent. I have referred to them as militia groups. Others are now referring to them as militia groups, as cells. That's what's going on. The line of questioning here gets more and more fascinating because Keith Ellison, who is absolutely a radical, he was a radical when he was in Congress. This is a guy who proudly takes pictures of himself with the Antifa handbook and then claims there's no such thing as Antifa. He wants to continue the idea of, well, it's just First Amendment. Protest is. Violent action is not.
Okay,
this is something that the law.
Did you ever encourage people to go out there and exercise the First?
Yeah, I
First
do.
Amendment, right?
I freely admit being in favor of the First Amendment.
You encourage trained activists to put themselves into harm's way because you had to know, because you were watching this, that there were scuffles at least, that these people were obstructing justice. I would think you'd actually, as the chief law enforcement officer of Minnesota, be concerned about people obstructing justice. So, putting their cars in streets, blocking roads. I would think as chief law enforcement, you would be concerned about that. But were you ever concerned about encouraging, I guess, people to support you to go out and put themselves into harm's way?
No, we never.
Impeding and obstructing illegal law enforcement action. Did that ever concern you?
Sir, that never happened. We all times said, if you want to protest peacefully, protest safely. But you'll never find me being against the First Amendment
right now. But
I'll always be for the First Amendment.
But you were seeing the scuffles, right? You were seeing and by the way, Minneapolis police officials could not help protect ICE officials, right? I mean, Representative Niska, isn't that when you're talking about the nullification of federal law, isn't that one of the, Hennepin County, that they simply could not help and protect ICE in their legal law enforcement actions?
The Minneapolis Police Department issued guidance in July saying that they would not even help with crowd control around immigration operations. And Minnesota leaders encouraged that kind of action. The Minnesota Lieutenant Governor encouraged people to put their bodies on the line.
That is accurate. Now, that's Harry Niska. He is a state rep out of Minnesota. Let's not forget the push towards violence that the leftists in Minnesota made here. By the way, not just Minnesota. Let's not lose sight of what took place here. Good questions, good push. Bring it back to the Senator Ron Johnson.
I can't imagine encouraging somebody that supported me politically to go and put themselves into harm's way. I can't imagine that, particularly when you know that these law enforcement officials had been shot at, a couple of illegal immigrants inadvertently killed because people were shooting at ICE officers. Their vehicles have been rammed by some of these peaceful protesters, probably the trained activists. They've had rocks thrown at their vehicles. I can't imagine encouraging people, put yourselves in harm's way. Get out there and record that. I, as a government official, would have said, back off. Let us work with ICE. Let's cooperate with them. Let's see if we can't de-escalate this. But Attorney General, you did the exact opposite. And 2 people are dead because you encouraged them to put themselves into harm's way. And now you're exploiting those 2 martyrs. That was a tragedy. It never should have happened.
agreed on every count. Agreed on every single count. They were exploited. They were pushed to get into harm's way. They were pushed to do these things. They did not listen to law enforcement. I still believe investigations should take place to determine whether these were, I'll use the expression, good shoots. But hold Renee Good and Alex Preddy blameless? Absolutely not. And I am one of the people who absolutely believes that the left does not care at all that these two people died. Just martyrs for the cause, man. That's all. Keep it here. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today. Would you take a look and see if there were changes made to Twitter and accepting live streams, and if somehow maybe AI could tell you, did they change how they do things? Because I'm starting to think that that could very well be it. Guys, welcome back. Tony Katz today. Good to be with you. The cold's good. Cold is fine. Thank you so much for asking, Jeffrey. So StreamYard, which is a service I used, said, hey, we can work with YouTube and we can add ads to the live stream. I was like, well, okay, how does that work? So I'm like, all right, let's see if it works. And then you guys told me it was happening during content as opposed to me being able to say, okay, activate one now, like say during a break, which would be fine. Great. Well, if it's going to happen just randomly during the live stream, no, it's not going to work. Not going to work. So it should have stopped. So that's number one. Now here is where it's getting stranger. So maybe Twitter changed something. And we used to be able to live stream the show to X. And now we can't. It doesn't take the stream. I'm like, I didn't do anything different. Maybe X did something different. Does anybody know? Did X change the rules about live streaming? They don't want things coming from other sources. You can't live stream if you're not this kind of user or that kind of user. I'm trying to figure it out. I really am. Anyway, back to the show. 7 people, including the suspected shooter, an 18-year-old woman who appeared to have died from a self-inflicted injury, were found dead at Tumbler Ridge Secondary School, according to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. That's the way the New York Times wrote the story about a transgender murderer in Canada. Tony Katz today. This was a boy, a man, who thought he was a woman. This started when he was a boy because his mother, according to the reporting, pushed him into this transgender insanity, called herself a transgender activist. They write that at the New York Times that most of the victims were 12 or 13-year-old students killed in their school library. In all, the police said the shooter killed 9 people, including herself, and they had earlier given a mistaken death toll of 10. It was himself. That's twice that the New York Times is willing to not only buy into a lie, but continue to push even after a murderer is dead. They're willing to push the idea that mental illness should be fed into. The shooter also killed her mother, 39, and stepbrother, 11, before going to the school. So this boy, this man, who was pushed into a transgender insanity by his mother, who was a transgender activist, was killed by him, who now the New York Times, in a third moment, refers to as her. Anybody who thinks the New York Times is all the news that's fit to print is out of their heads. And I do not know how one becomes the paper of record. Why is the New York Times the paper of record? Let's ask. Why is the New York Times the paper of record? It's a question I really should be asking AI, don't you think? They referred to it as the paper of record because of its early adoption of systematic archiving and indexing. So really more of an honorary title. We should pull it, even the honorary title. They are the paper of falsehoods, of lies, of manipulations, of propaganda. And any organization that would still utilize purposefully the wrong pronoun for fear of upsetting anyone. This guy already killed 9 people, 8 including himself. If I use the wrong pronoun, somebody else is now going to go be a killer? Not everybody dealing with mental illness leads to violence. Agreed. But no rational person wants to feed into mental illness. So let's stop. And the people who do it, let's tell them they're wrong. And the medical professionals who do that, let's take their licenses because they are a danger to all of us. Keep it here. This is Tony Katz today. All right. I do not know why is I try to avoid the mobile chat. It's mobile's unbelievable. Unbelievable. These people are spectacular. By the way, get your tickets. Trump 1 year later. It's going to be such a good night. The bourbon, so good. And if you're VIP, you don't get 3 bourbons, you get 5. And the food and the live music. And now I'm doing a whole dessert thing. And I'm telling you, it's going to be an incredible presentation. Incredible look. You are going to love it. I've got so much good data for you about how to win the midterms. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Get your tickets. Get your tickets right now. Hold on. Someone sent me something. I have to listen to this. Stay right there. All right. Sorry. Just had to hear that. I don't know if you heard that, but I did. Oh, you want me to explain the difference? Okay. So, if you're in the mobile chat, well, let's start. If you're in the landscape chat, the chat that you or watching the view that you would normally see on YouTube if you're on a laptop or a desktop, the chat there is a place where people engage and talk and ask questions and agree and disagree and do all those kinds of things. If you're on the mobile, if you're watching the mobile and you're in the chat, you're in the 27th level of hell. Get out of there while you still can. Every troll, every insanity, every hateful this, that, and the other, it's wild. It's not necessary either. None of these people are going to change what I think about. None of these people are going to change the show. None of them. So, if you can come into this one, if you can, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I'm glad that you're here. But why is that happening? StreamYard not showing up. We're gonna do the whole thing while we're doing this. We're gonna do all the technical support. Oh, remove X as a designation from StreamYard and add it again. I reconnected. Maybe I can do that. Hold on. Let me see. Oh, I'd have to get out of it. Let me see. Let me see if I can do it this way. Oh my God, we're risking everything. I love it. So is the Pentagon preparing for war? Well, if you follow the stories, certainly looks like it, doesn't it? If you take a look at how they're preparing a second carrier to head to the Middle East to deal with Iran, well, what dealing do we actually have here? What dealing is actually taking place here? Are you going to somehow get the Ayatollah to leave so these people can live free? How does this work? Tony Katz today. Good to be with you, especially considering Trump wants to continue negotiating with them regarding the nuclear program. Well, if you're negotiating with them, you're stating that they can stick around. That's a real problem. Let's start with what we know. According to Newsmax, a second carrier group is getting ready. The Pentagon preparing to deploy another aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East. So make sure we're clear here. We're not talking about an aircraft carrier. We're talking about the carrier and the destroyers and all of that support mechanism. Certainly, we saw that was it the Carl Vinson, which is the largest aircraft carrier we have. The Carl Vinson that was in the Caribbean, is that on the move? Wall Street Journal reporting that defense officials are developing a plan to send another carrier. So they haven't said which one yet. The rumor, the USS George H.W. Bush. This pending a final order from the president. In addition, as reported by airandspaceforces.com, there are definitely some niche things, niche publications out there. They're moving closer to the Middle East. February 9th, a half dozen F-35A Lightning II fifth-generation planes landed in the UK. This after crossing the Atlantic. This is flight tracking data air traffic control communications are showing. Now we know. Hold on a second. Do I have it wrong? I thought the Gerald Ford is the largest. You're right. The Carl Vinson is not the largest. It is the Gerald Ford. That's the largest. My mistake there. I apologize. Thank you for the correction. You'll remember that we created a deal with Saudi Arabia, and we sold them F-35 fighters. The F-35 is top of the line, putting a lot of American hardware in Saudi Arabia. Not only did we do this, we sold them Abrams tanks. Why in the world would we do that? And you realize fairly quickly that there's no reason to do that. There is absolutely no reason for them to have an Abrams tank. They're not going to be doing any type of invasion work. It's not how they operate. Why would they have the M1 Abrams? It's not for them. It's for us. Start viewing Saudi Arabia not as this nation, but rather for us as a land-based aircraft carrier. Think of it as a place for us to grab hardware and launch from. Now, I want to be as clear as I can, and I have said this many times. I find it disgusting that after September 11th, we didn't handle Saudi Arabia like we should have. Because we could still be in the same place with them right now. We don't 100% trust you, but compared to everybody else, you're pretty great. And we'll find a way to make deals. Because here we are. You can't go back in time. You have to make the deals. The world is what the world is. There's a Sunni Muslim, there's a Shia Muslim. There is a difference, and you still have the whole Muslim world that you have to deal with. Then you've got a Middle East where you have a lot of different actors and a lot of different factions, not only based on Sunni Shia, but based on a whole bunch of thoughts on caliphates and being Islamists, etc., following Sharia that you're going to have to deal with. Then, of course, you want to have a launching pad that gets you closer to what? China and the threat that they are. Saudi Arabia is right there. What do you think the Greenland conversation is about? The Greenland conversation is about Golden Dome. But the Greenland conversation is about keeping an eye on Russia and on China. And everybody knows this, including the Europeans. And you know why the Greenland conversation has gone quiet? Because that deal is coming. It's coming. And when that deal is done, and Trump says, the Europeans, they were some negotiators. I'll tell you what, they were some negotiators right there. That's going to be Trump's little give to, oh yeah, they opened up their mouths and it didn't mean anything. And I told them who their mother was. And then, they wanted this anyway, so we got it done. The Europeans are going to say, we really explained to President Trump how this works, and Europe won't be pushed around. And they're going to all glad hands, and then they're going to get off the stage, and they're going to get into their waiting gas guzzling SUVs, and then they're going to say, thank the Lord above that Trump did this. And so will every European who isn't criminally insane. By the way, the Europeans, where do I have the story? The European Parliament reaffirming its commitment to transgender rights by voting to include the recognition of trans women as women within its official priorities for the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Congratulations, ladies. You've been erased by penises. And I know what you're saying. Usually you have to go to a Magic Mike show for that. The Europeans just erased you. Women are women, and men who say they're women are women, and women don't have any say in that because we just voted that men can say that they're women. We're Europe. We would have been destroyed by the Russians if it wasn't for the United States for 70 years. Good Lord. But some Europeans aren't bat crap crazy, and they're going to say, thank goodness. So there are a lot of pieces here. And this is where I see Saudi Arabia. So that F-35s are going to make their way over, well, the more the merrier. My question is, to what end? What is the moment here? How do you make this come together? Meaning, you're now going to utilize military force to deal with the Ayatollah? How does that work? You're going to take out more nuclear capabilities? Again, how does that work? How does any of that lead to a freer Iranian people out from under the yoke of this Islamist lowlife? I can't do the math at all. I do this for a living. I talk to people smarter than me who have more understanding of the situation. None of it makes sense. And then you have this story. Netanyahu was in the U.S. talking to Trump and told Netanyahu that he wants to keep trying diplomacy to pressure Iran into curbing its nuclear program. Now I ask the question, why would you negotiate with somebody you were trying to remove from power? So is President Trump not trying to remove him from power? But he told the protesters that help was on its way. If the Ayatollah is still there, what is the help that you're providing the protester who just wants to live their life and not get killed and not deal with the sanctions that have completely crippled the nation? Not that I oppose the sanctions, but it hasn't removed the Ayatollah and it hasn't removed the grip of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So you said help was on the way. How would I believe that if you're now negotiating with the Ayatollah regarding a nuclear program? Or you're not negotiating with the Ayatollah, you're negotiating with somebody else? Does the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps still remain? Because if so, nothing changes. Me, I want the changes. I can appreciate the fact that the people of Iran have to do this. I can appreciate that the changes only come if the IRGC is broken, if they crack. But there's still money going their way. They still have unlimited power. They're not giving that up. They're not giving it up unless they have to, and they don't fear that they have to. That's obvious because it's been more than a month than we saw these protests, and they're still there. So, when I see that Trump is willing to strike, and when I see that Trump is saying last time Iran decided that they were better off not making a deal, and they were hit with Midnight Hammer, that did not work well for them. Hopefully this time they will be more reasonable and responsible. This is the Ayatollah. What reasonable and responsible were you going for? Seriously, what did you think was going to happen? How does this help the people? And if you're negotiating with the Ayatollah, you're saying that the Ayatollah can remain. I'm not quite sure what the end game is here. I'm not. I argue only that if you're going to put now two potentially carrier groups in the Persian Gulf, in the Med, in the Gulf of Oman, you're going to take out every bit of their nuclear capability and the Middle East is going to become a safer place. Does that then lead to the Ayatollah being crippled? because it would seem to me that the thing that you have to cripple is not their ability to launch missiles from these very mobile missile launchers. It's you and me on a bar stool having a bourbon. If you want to cripple the Ayatollah, you don't cripple him militarily. You cripple him economically. Well, Tony, you just said the sanctions, but they're still selling oil. Do you move carrier groups into the Gulf of Oman, into the Persian Gulf, into the Med to take out the oil fields? To prevent them from pumping? Do you quite literally blow them up and starve them completely? And if you blow them up, how quickly can you get back online so the people can now engage the oil? And as Trump would say it, the United States could be a beneficiary as well, bringing down oil costs. Maybe you want to get rid of them being able to make oil so you can have more opportunities with Venezuelan oil, to which we have some control. I'm just putting the ideas out. I'm trying to make sense of the moment. Because it seems to me the only way to get rid of the Ayatollah and the IRGC is to get rid of the oil that funds them, not the nuclear possibilities they may still have. Although I'm fine with getting rid of the nuclear possibilities they may still have. I'm Tony Katz. This is Tony Katz Today. Welcome back. Tony Katz Today. So we did something. I clearly did something to the live stream that throttled the daylights out of it, which is weird because the views showing live don't match up to what we're seeing the total amount of views being. It's very weird. Very weird. Now, I have a question. Can I do this? How do I... Let me see. I'm in the YouTube control room. Oh, that's weird. I didn't realize there was a YouTube control room. That is very odd. Oh, I can see it this way too. Hold on. Wait, how did I do that? No. How in the world did I do this? There it is. Nope. I can't figure it out. I got to figure it out. It's driving me nuts. Driving me nuts. Because we had a system and the system works. All of a sudden the system changed. It's like, what are you doing to me? So whenever change comes, we gotta fight through what those changes are. If Claudia can fix it, bring in Claudia. Let's go to work. Very weird. Very, very weird. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm glad you guys are here. Appreciate it quite a bit. And that's what made the whole thing with Twitter weird. Why was it not connecting to X? Because we always had a much bigger viewership from X than from YouTube. Never sure why, but okay. Let's get ready. What will it be?
Diet pause associated back in her search history. Is that appropriate conduct?
I'm not going to comment on an allegation that is unsubstantiated. I don't know anything about that.
Attorney General Bondi testified, and she had a piece of paper that had Giant Paul's search history in her mind of that file.
I don't know anything about that. I'm not commenting on it. I haven't seen or heard anything about that.
Thank you,
But that would be inappropriate if it happened.
Yeah, the Attorney General having the search history of a member of Congress, I would agree. Inappropriate if it happened. Just like keeping tabs on James Rosen from the Obama administration was wrong. Just like the Biden administration tracking things was wrong. It's wrong. Just like Jack Smith having phone records, completely wrong in every way. Tony Katz today. Good to be here. Good to be with you. My God, did Pam Bondi screw it up yesterday? Screwed it up. And I'm going to get more into this in the next hour. But I did Sean Spicer's show today. You should be able to see it this evening. And we do a thing. He does a thing on winners and losers. And my loser was Pam Bondi, because Pam Bondi decided to meet the clown show energy of the Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee with her own clown show energy. What happened yesterday with the House Judiciary was pathetic and embarrassing. It was fundamentally stupid. And Pam Bondi had every opportunity to rise above it. The Attorney General had every chance. And instead, she got into the muck. And there are people who are like, oh man, she looked good. She didn't look good. She got in a few jabs. Great. She got in a few jabs. It's not the point. The point is they look like clowns. I didn't say you couldn't push back. I didn't say you can't fight, but you got to be good at it. She's not. She's not. I'm going to get into it. And I have a take on what has to happen. And then I'll get into what Carl Higbee over at Newsmax had to say. Remember, I do a lot of work at Newsmax, but I'm not paid by Newsmax. Higbee was absolutely right. And he's taken some heat. I've got his back. I will explain. Keep it all right here. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today. All right, so I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna work on what's going on with the streaming. But I'm glad you guys are here. I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show. So here's what we've got. We've got the radio show and commercial break. We will take the commercial break. So smoke them if you got them. Kick back and relax. I do have new things to start playing. That should be in the next week or so. So this what we usually put up there we'll have some other things to share with you. Relax, go take a break. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Glad you guys are here. Welcome back, everybody. Tony Katz today. Good to be here. Good to be with you. All right. I think I have figured out what is gone wrong. Oh, I'm feeling it in the voice today, too. I thought I was better. A lot of talking today. A lot of talking. Let's see. There we go. All right. Now, the president is supposed to speak this hour. But I don't think it's going to come into play. I'm willing to bet you any amount of money that goes late. So I'm not anticipating being able to bring that to anybody. Okay. I've got that. All right. Let's go do a radio show, shall we? Yes, we shall. It's a very interesting graph. When I say very interesting, it's the kind of graph that'll make you rethink a lot of stuff. The graph is illegal entries as percentage of home population. The data comes from Customs Border Patrol and DHS, and certainly someone could say to me, hey, I don't think that data is totally accurate, and I would listen. But what this shows is the growth of people from 6 countries coming to the United States: Guatemala, Venezuela, Honduras, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua. I started at the bottom and I went to the top. The bottom and the top of what, you may ask? Tony Katz. Tony Katz today. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Find everything at TonyKatz.com. And don't forget, we're just a couple weeks away from Trump 1 year and 1 month later. The food, the bourbon, if the weather's good, the cigars, and of course, the good times. I was going to do this event in January about the first year of Trump and how it leads us into the midterms. Got delayed because of that snowstorm. And so now it's going to be February 28th, Hyatt Regency, downtown Indianapolis. Trump 1 year And 1 month later, still the bourbon, still the food, still the possibility of the cigars if the weather's nice, and a great time. Tickets.tonykatz.com. Going to be amazing. Red tie. It's a red tie gala. You can wear the tux. You can wear the cocktail attire. You can just put on pants and come join. Going to be amazing because I have got a whole conversation, a whole presentation to how we get to the midterm victory. And I want to be able to share this with everybody. Tickets.tonykatz.com. It's going to be an incredible, incredible night, February 28th. I hope to see you there. And one of the things to discuss is this right here. Guatemala, Venezuela, Honduras, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua. What is this? This is a chart showing the percentage of illegal immigrants in the U.S. as home population. When you look at this chart, you realize that over 3% of the population of Guatemala and Venezuela, two very different nations, live in the United States or illegal immigrants in the United States. Over 5% of Honduras, nearly 6% of Haiti, and over 7% of Cuba and Nicaragua. That's the kind of data that will put things into some very unique perspective. First of all, we're sure we're talking about illegal. Well, this involves Title VIII encounters and removal flights. This is the data. And this is the data that comes from February of 2021 through January of 2025. Oh, you mean the Biden years? Or you mean the years where the Democratic Party tried to have the United States commit suicide, or you could see it as the Democrats tried to murder the country. I know that's very, very harsh for a lot of people, but I have no time to concern myself with those people. The country is in a serious problem and it needs to be fixed. How in the world can we possibly do our best for legal immigrants who want to be Americans when we have illegal immigrants not caring about the rules and certainly not caring about legal immigrants trying to screw it up for everybody else? Incredible numbers. Really large-scale numbers. Over 6%, over 7% of the population of other nations is living here. That's an untenable number, you understand? No, it's not just untenable for us, it's untenable for them. How much population can they lose? How are they even a country? But it is from this that I say to you how important it is to pass the SAVE Act. And I want to be clear that the American left started with an objection to the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is about voter ID. The SAVE Act, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, is about being able to prove who you are as a citizen before you vote. A rational point of view. We would call this voter ID laws. The left started with a very unique position. This is Jim Crow 2.0. Because Chuck Schumer said of Black Americans, they're too stupid to get an ID. I think that's a pretty racist thing to say. I think that's a racist and disgusting, despicable thing to say. And I think Chuck Schumer added himself as a despicable, disgusting racist. I don't know what New Yorkers are thinking voting for that guy. Black people cannot get an ID. Black people can't prove who they are. They're not capable. It's wrong to ask them to. Why? To say you can't ask them to is to think they're too weak, too incapable, too feeble. That is, again, a racist and bigoted thing to think. What, you as a white man, Chuck Schumer, you can figure it out, but the person who's black can't? I'm sorry, what kind of KKK stuff were they teaching at your synagogue? Because that never happened in my synagogue. Oh, no. We were focused on other things. Like, when's lunch? I could use some corned beef. And then the person next to you said, I can't handle any more corned beef. Is there some egg salad? And then you said, what is with you and always the egg salad? And they were like, could you please leave me alone about the egg salad? And then somebody else said, is there going to be any tuna fish? And that, kids, was how the Jewish holidays were spent. Talking about food and waiting to eat food and then deciding that the food you wanted was crap, but the food I want is spectacular. I have now explained Judaism. You're welcome. By the way, every Jewish person listening right now is like, that happened to me. Chuck Schumer is as bigoted and offensive as one can be. And there's no difference in the argument of that's Jim Crow 2.0 and the idea of the KKK saying that people who are black don't have a mind to be able to handle other things. It's beyond offensive. I said it. I meant it. I'm not apologizing to Chuck Schumer. I don't have to apologize to that guy for nothing. He ain't tough and he ain't street. And just because he's a senator from New York, don't mean he's New York. He wants to get tough with me. He's more than welcome to. Yuts. And they realized, did the Democrats, that position failed epically. And one of the reasons it failed epically was this very interesting story from a news organization, NOW, I believe it's called. Yeah, I think this is the story right here.
Somalia's electoral authorities have started issuing voter ID cards across Mogadishu as the capital prepares for its first direct municipal council elections in decades under a one-person, one-vote system.
You could actually feel my Scott Jennings look into the camera of side-eye like, really? Somalia, the original home of Ilhan Omar, has voter ID and one person, one vote. Huh? What do you know about that? So I guess what Chuck Schumer and Democrats were saying is people who are black in Somalia can figure it out. People who are black in the United States can't. Again, the racism of Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Party. Right? You know, I mentioned the KKK, but it's the Democratic Party. So what's the difference? They then decided, did this Democratic Party, to make a switch. They made a pivot. They went from over here, they went to over there. I was on the east side, now I'm on the west side. And they said, you know what? Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Oh, I'll tell you what the problem is. You want to know what the problem is? I will tell you exactly what the problem is. The problem is that if you have the voter ID, right? If you get all that voter ID, what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? Well, women aren't going to be able to vote. Sorry. What? Oh yeah, because women, if they change their name after getting married, they're not going to be able to prove who they are, and they're not going to be able to vote. Huh. So they went from saying that people who are black are too dumb to vote to saying that women are too dumb to vote. Now, at this moment, I have a headache. Because as a conservative radio host, which I am an actual USDA choice conservative. I don't apologize for a damn thing. If I said anything like that, I would be vilified. The calls for me to be fired would be overwhelming. The social media troll brigade would never stop. My home would get targeted as if somehow it isn't already. it would be unyielding. Commentators would get on MS Now and CNN and talk about what awful, evil things I said, and they would cry. They would weep. They would fall apart. And that's just Van Jones. They would be out of their mind, apoplectic. They would be in upheaval. They would have to take days off of work. They were so personally offended. Chuck Schumer says it. Democrats say it. They got nothing to say. Absolutely nothing to say. The left favors doing away with any level of ID laws because they want the opportunity for fraud. If they want to argue the fraud's not happening, they're more than welcome to. But one should ensure that the fraud can't happen to the best of one's ability. Voter ID is the only answer. What kind of ridiculousness could there be? Over there at CNN, on the show hosted by Abby Phillip, Scott Jennings got into a conversation with Alicia Johnson. And I mean, I don't know if I should tease it or should just let it go. Because Scott Jennings is asking a question. You keep saying that black people will be disenfranchised if there's voter ID. How?
Don't want us to believe they are okay with racism.
Wait, what voting rights is he taking away from black voters?
Oh, if we look
What,
at
the SAVE Act?
the SAVE Act, that's exactly what we're talking about. That is actually going to continue to disenfranchise overwhelmingly a lot of people of color. There are so many civil rights organizations that have run the data. If we look at the way that it is going to disenfranchise black voters, it's the same reason why Chuck Schumer called it Jim Crow 2.0.
So,
this is the same president. If we want to continue...
You haven't said how yet.
I am talking about it. It's the way that you're putting new poll taxes on this when you're making people have... That's what we can call them now. It's kind of an idiom, right? If you want to say that people have to prove that they are citizens, that they have to prove with a voter ID, the reality is you're layering what is a constitutional right for the American people and making it harder for people to vote in this country. And
now I'm going to stop her right there because I've heard this poll tax thing before. And I argue that we should make the IDs free. A poll tax is the idea that you're putting some level of cost in between the citizen and voting. Can't have that. Can't do that. Right? And what she is arguing here is that you can't put a tax, a dollar amount, in between a person and their rights. To which I ask the following question. Do I need an ID to buy a gun? I'll wait. Do I need some waiting music? Maybe some, do I have some sweet listening music here? Yeah, maybe I do. Yeah, here we go. I'll just wait for an answer. Do I need an ID to buy a gun? There's an ID that I have to pay for poll tax. Is it a tax on my right? Maybe you can't call it a poll tax because I'm not going to the polls, but is it indeed a tax, a fee that I am forced to pay to be able to engage my rights as listed in the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution? But let's put that aside. I've already eliminated the conversation by saying the ID should be free. Now what? Scott Jennings, any thoughts?
It's going to disenfranchise black voters.
Concern you that you're making all these claims? You've yet to lay out how it's hurting anyone, but 76% of black voters think we should show an ID to vote. 80% of Hispanic voters, 83% of the American people. Are you saying that black voters are too dumb to know what's good for them? I mean, it sounds pretty condescending what I mean. That's three-quarters of black voters.
That's Abby Phillip. Sorry, Abby Phillip coming in for the save. You want to argue that the SAVE Act is more than just voter ID. I think that Republicans should take them at their word and just say, okay, here's a voter ID law. And watch Democrats still be opposed to it. We're through the looking glass. They're opposed to showing an ID because they want the opportunity for fraud. And we don't have to debate it anymore. All we have to do is pass it. That's it. I'm Tony Katz, and this is Tony Katz Today. Welcome back, Tony Katz. Tony Katz Today. Let me see. Yeah, he's not going to be on time. If President Trump is on time, everybody gets a cookie. I don't know how I'm going to get you the cookies, but yeah, he's not going to be on time. So that's that. Good gosh. All right, so what did I have? Hold on, I had a bunch of stuff. I've got this right here. I've got the death of James Vanderbeek, which is a really horrific story. Absolutely horrific. And someone sent this to me to play in the morning show tomorrow, but I may play it now. Yeah, I'm probably gonna play it now. All right. It really is. It's an interesting story of a guy who knew he was dying and asked himself, what does he want his life to be about? And from every story I've heard, decent guy. James Vanderbeek, the actor, Varsity Blues, passed away at the age of 48 yesterday. Colorectal cancer. It's a horrifying story. It's horrifying because he was young. It's way too young. And a life ahead of him. Tony Katz Today. And he had talked about this and shared some of this. And there is a video that someone had brought up to me again today. And someone suggested I share for my morning show. I want to share it to you now. This was James Vanderbeek in his own words about his life.
Today's my birthday, and it has been the hardest year of my life, and I wanted to share something that I learned with y'all. When I was younger, I used to define myself as an actor, right? Which was never really all that fulfilling. And then I became a husband, and that was much better. And then I became a father, and that was the ultimate. I could define myself then as a loving, capable, strong, supportive husband, father, provider, steward of the land that we're so lucky to live on. And for a long time, that felt like a really good definition to the question, who am I? What am I? And then this year, I had to look my own mortality in the eye. I had to come nose to nose with death. And all of those definitions that I cared so deeply about were stripped from me. I was away for treatment. I could be a husband that was helpful to my wife. I could no longer be a father who could pick up his kids and put them to bed and be there for them. I could not be a provider because that wasn't working. I couldn't even be a steward of the land because at times I was too weak to prune all the trees during the window that you're supposed to prune them. And so I was faced with the question, if I am just a too skinny, weak guy alone in an apartment with cancer, what am I? And I meditated and the answer came through. I am worthy of God's love simply because I exist. And if I'm worthy of God's love, shouldn't I also be worthy of my own? And the same is true for you. And as I move through this healing portal toward recovery, I wanted to share that with you because I think that revelation that came to me was due in no small part to all the prayers and the love that have been directed toward me. So
James Vanderbeek, dead at the age of 48, and had a lot to share. This is Tony Katz Today. Something else. Really is. I remember seeing it then and got reminded of it today as I was doing some other work. Someone shared it or brought it up as I was doing something. And then my morning show producer was like, do we want to share this tomorrow? And I'm like, I want to share this right now. How do you define yourself? How do you think of yourself? I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for other people. I certainly learned a while ago that I don't define myself by this, by what I do, by the radio or by anything else. I don't. But it's a real question. Do you define yourself as a father, as a husband, and what happens when there is an ailment or an issue that prevents some things from happening? And I would disagree and say to James that I think I would still define myself in that way because I didn't stop. That my physical is not capable doesn't mean that my mental isn't still connected. That would be my argument. But there is something very true of men. I don't know if women go through this in this way. Something very true of men. Men of responsibility, men who engage a bit of stoicism, which I think is very important. To be able to provide and protect is more than just the responsibility. It is the calling. And the oftentimes sacrifice that comes with that, whether it is noticed or not, is part of what makes it so good. It does. It's unique. But to be there as a mind, to be there as a figurehead, to be there as a leader to still have a level of mental presence and to recognize that what you had brought before this moment in your life changed doesn't get erased, which is something else I would tell James. I don't think that your children, I believe he has 7 kids. You getting sick, you going through this, you passing doesn't change a life, short or long, of impressions that you left upon them. I want to live longer because I want to be able to provide more impression to my children. But if it were to end right now, I don't think they lose that. I don't think they lose that fathering. I hope not. At least, hopefully, if it was good. Some people more than happy to lose the fathering when it wasn't good. There's a lot in that, a lot in what Vanderbeek was talking about, a lot worthy of discussion. So we will get into it even more. Meanwhile, the president is supposed to be speaking about the EPA. We will see if he gets to it. I think he's gonna be late. I'm convinced he's gonna be late. Three more things to discuss. Tony Katz today, stories that should be getting more news coverage. We did talk about El Paso yesterday in depth, and I want to say for the record, nothing changes my position. Cartels are not in charge, and if cartels think they can disrupt the American way of life through drones or any other activities, I believe it is Mexico's responsibility to handle it. If it means we have to create a barrier between ourselves and Mexico to ensure the safety and security and free movement of the American people, I'm all in. This was a story about the El Paso International Airport. And the airport was shut down. It got shut down. The FAA offered a grounding of all flights, commercial, cargo, and general aviation, in a 10 nautical mile radius. It's the first shutdown of American airspace since September 11th, 2001. The claim, it was a cartel drone and that the military could not ensure civilian aircraft safety. Flights were shut down, going in, going out. There were reports of roads shut down, all sorts of things were going on. It's a weird story because they shut it down. They said it's going to be a 10-day shutdown. Less than 24 hours later, the shutdown's lifted. What in the world? How in the world does a 10-day shutdown become like 13 hours? If it even was 13 hours. Well, you see, it wasn't actually a drone. No, what was it? Well, it was the military testing some lasers and doing some other things. I'm sorry, it was what now? No, that's not the story. It was a party balloon, and the military thought that it was a drone, and they shot it down, and the whole thing was just a big hot mess. It was a party balloon? You mean little Johnny's 4th birthday Mylar balloon with the Elmo face? We shut down an airspace because of deflating Elmo? No. It was the military and they were doing some testing. No. It was still a drone and a real concern. Holy cow. My argument remains. I can defend my argument anywhere. I thought this one through. But it's really rough when you can't come up with a story. And when you cannot come up with a story, just for the sake of clarity, no one believes you. I have no idea what happened, guys. I have no idea what the military did or didn't do. I have no idea what was coming from the Mexican side. I have no idea if it was some kind of party favor flying in the sky. I don't know. But right now, the President of the United States is speaking with the EPA Administrator, Lee Zeldin.
Very much. But I'm pleased to be joined today by EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, who you all know, and to announce the single largest deregulatory action in American history. That's a big statement in American history. And I think we can add the words by far. Under the process just completed by the EPA, we are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding, a disastrous Obama-era policy that severely damaged the American auto industry and massively drove up prices for American consumers. Prices went up incredibly for a worse product. This action will eliminate over $1.3 trillion of regulatory costs and help bring car prices tumbling down dramatically. You're going to get a better car. You're going to get a car that starts easier, a car that works better.
The endangerment findings, 2009. This is the EPA saying it's carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide. It's all a threat to public health, which led to the CAFE standards, which made it impossible to make a car that was worth its salt and led to the electric nightmare that car dealers are dealing with right now.
That actually make factories rock and roll and other things drive very nicely as a threat to health and human welfare, known as the endangerment finding. This determination had no basis, in fact, had none whatsoever, and it had no basis in law. On the contrary, over the generations, fossil fuels have saved millions of lives and lifted billions of people out of poverty and all over the world. And you see it with the blackouts all over where they don't use it, where they went to wind, intermittent wind, which is weak and ineffective and very, very costly, most costly energy there is. And people are dying because there was no air conditioning or there was no heating. Lots of other things, bad things happened. And yet this radical rule became the legal foundation for the Green New Scam, one of the greatest scams in history, probably as great, maybe even greater than Russia hoax, etc., which the Obama and Biden administration used to destroy countless jobs. And the jobs have been just decimated. Although they're all coming back because of tariffs, they're all coming back into our country at levels we've never seen before. But it raised prices and caused immense harm to the U.S. auto industry. We thought irreparable, but we've got them back. We're coming back now. I was in Detroit, as you know, with Ford, and they had one of the earliest plants from the early 1900s, and it was going to be closed down. And then when I won, they said, let's keep it open for a little while. Let's see what happens. And they just announced, as you know, they're going 24 hours around the clock with that same plant that was going to be closed because of what we've done. For example, under the endangerment finding, they forced the hated start-stop feature onto American consumers, which unnecessarily shuts off a car's engine when you stop at a red light. In other words, the engine goes off. That's great. The endangerment finding was also used to impose the massive and really very expensive electric vehicle mandate, expensive in the sense that nobody wanted it. Everybody was going to be forced to buy an electric car in a very short period of time, even though you can't power the car because we would have had to spend $5 trillion on power stations. That's all dead, gone, over. These crippling restrictions were a major factor in driving up car prices to unprecedented levels, and the car that you were getting was not nearly as good. In 4 years under the Biden administration, the price of a new and used car rose more than 22%, all to facilitate the Green New Scam without achieving any meaningful impact on the environment, but making the car worse. That is why, effective immediately, we are repealing the ridiculous endangerment finding and terminating all additional green emission standards imposed unnecessarily on vehicle models and engines between 2012 and 2027 and beyond. This action will save American consumers trillions of dollars and will lower the average cost of a new vehicle by close to $3,000. Think of that.
I am a very
During my campaign, I promised to
$3,000
cut
doesn't help
10
much,
old
Mr.
regulations for
President,
every
on a
new
$50,000
regulation.
car, or what we've seen in
And we've
$80,000
exceeded that.
trucks.
We've instead done it.
But I
10
like any
regulations,
movement
we
in
were
this
able to cut
direction.
129. So now we cut 129. So think of that. I promised to cut 10 old regulations for every new one, but we did more than 10. We did 129. It's something nobody can even believe it. So we did a lot of regulation cutting in the first administration, a record, nobody even close to it now. We're actually exceeding it in this administration. The biggest one yet that we've done is happening right now. So perhaps no industry has benefited more from our historic deregulation campaign than the U.S. auto industry. We canceled the EPA's absurd, just totally absurd tailpipe emission standards, which was a disaster for automobile manufacturing, and revoked Biden's emissions waiver that would have allowed California to regulate automobiles for the entire nation. And they're crazy out in California. They have nothing but trouble out there, as you know. That's why people are leaving in record numbers. I also ended Joe Biden's extreme cafe emission standards, saving the average American consumer much more than $1,000 when they buy a new car. But now we're talking about close to $3,000. These regulation cuts, combined with our tax cuts and tariffs, are the reason why the world's largest automakers have announced that they're going to be spending in excess of $100 billion in the United States in the next very short period of time, building new auto plants. We're bringing our auto plants, assembly plants, and factories roaring back to life, not even mentioning AI and all of the other things. We're building thousands of businesses in the United States. And if you remember, on my first day, they said if I could ever get the Dow up to 50,000 in my last year, in other words, in the fourth year, that it would be an unbelievable miracle. But don't worry about it, because it'll never happen, they said. And if I could get the S&P up to 7,000, they said in the fourth year, they said it will never happen. Let's not even talk about it. I have things. Let's not even waste our time talking about it. Well, at the very end of my first year, the Dow hit 50,000. Now it's over 50,000. And 3 days before that, the S&P hit 7,000. So we didn't have to wait till the end of the fourth year. We just waited till the end of the first year. We've never had a country in a position like this, and a lot of it's due to tariffs, and a lot of it's due to the fact that we had a great election.
I wonder if it's
And a
going to
lot
punch
of
the
good things have
Republicans who
been
voted against the
done.
tariffs.
One of the good things I did was put Lee Zeldin in charge of our environment. So I'm going to ask Lee to say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a big deal. Under President Trump's leadership today, the Trump EPA has finalized the single largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States of America. Referred to by some as the holy grail of federal regulatory overreach, the 2009 Obama EPA endangerment finding is now eliminated. This action will save American taxpayers over $1.3 trillion. What that means is lower prices, more choices, and an end of heavy-handed climate policies. With today's announcement, American families will save over $2,400 for a new vehicle. 16 years ago, an ideological crusade within the Obama administration set off the most costly regulatory power grab our country has ever experienced.
Absolutely true. I've got more with Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, a rolling back of nonsense standards that hopefully can lead to better cars and lower prices. Keep it here. This is Tony Katz Today.
Powers over the vehicles we drive, even though the best reading of the Clean Air Act clearly states otherwise. The Obama and Biden administrations used it to steamroll into existence a left-wing wish list of costly climate policies, electric vehicle mandates, and other requirements that assaulted consumer choice and affordability. And who paid the biggest price? hardworking families, small businesses, millions of Americans who just want a reliable, affordable car to get to work, take their kids to school, or go to church on Sunday. The endangerment finding and the regulations that were based on it didn't just regulate emissions. It regulated and targeted the American dream. And now the endangerment finding is hereby eliminated, as well as all greenhouse gas emission standards that followed. The red tape has been cut. Manufacturers will no longer be burdened by measuring, compiling, or reporting greenhouse gas emissions for vehicles and engines. And the forced transition to electric vehicles is eliminated. No longer will automakers be pressured to shift their fleets towards electric vehicles, vehicles that are still sitting unsold on dealer lots all across America. And as a cherry on top, we are ending the federal government's push to get manufacturers to install that Obama switch, the almost universally despised start-stop feature. There will be no more climate participation trophies awarded to manufacturers for making Americans' cars die at every red light and stop sign. It's over, done, finished.
Oh,
under President Trump's leadership,
I get it turned off.
vehicle manufacturers can once again build what Americans want, not what politicians and bureaucrats in Washington demand. President Trump campaigned on reviving the auto industry, and he continues to deliver win after win after win, ending electric vehicle mandates, getting rid of the Biden cafe standards with Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy, and securing massive new U.S. manufacturing investments and all the jobs that come with it. Affordable cars mean opportunity. That means jobs, healthcare, education, and mobility, especially for working families and rural Americans who rely on their vehicles every single day. And this isn't just about making the American economy boom. It's also about restoring the rule of law, a fundamental principle of our great republic. For years, unelected bureaucrats twisted the Clean Air Act into something it was never meant to be. The Obama administration twisted itself into some kind of mental pretzel to invoke authority it didn't have and to sidestep Congress. They claimed that 6 greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles, some of which aren't even emitted from vehicles and trucks, contribute some amount above zero to global climate change, what they said endangered public health. But their wild web of mental leaps isn't prescribed in federal statute. The Obama EPA's House of Cards upended the best reading of the Clean Air Act, as well as 50 years of EPA precedent on what constitutes regulable air pollution. In the 16 years that intervened, the Supreme Court has established clear precedent in Loper Bright Enterprises and West Virginia versus EPA. And in light of these Supreme Court decisions and other developments, upon his swearing in last year, President Trump immediately tasked on day one, submitting requirements, recommendations, research on the legality and continued applicability of the 2009 endangerment finding. And at Trump's speed, he wanted that research and recommendation turned around instantly. We looked at the Clean Air Act. We looked at what the highest court in the land had said, and we used a very simple metric. If Congress didn't authorize it, EPA shouldn't be doing it.
I like that.
Congress never voted for these climate mandates inside of Section 202 of the Clean Air Act. If Congress wants EPA to regulate the heck out of greenhouse gases emitted from motor vehicles, then Congress can clearly make that the law, which they haven't done for good reason. Today, we dismantle the tactics and legal gymnastics used by the Obama and Biden administrations to backdoor their ideological agendas on the American people. Following the plain language of the law, we have now realigned EPA's rulemaking to reflect the Clean Air Act exactly as it is written and as Congress intended, not as others might wish it to be. Where our predecessors focused on trying to make and please a few fear-mongering climate alarmists, the Trump EPA is making decisions to benefit all Americans based on common sense and reality. And the American people are tired of paying the price of political games.
That is Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator with President Trump. The rollback of the endangerment findings. So this is 2009, the EPA saying that it was carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. They threaten health and welfare. Therefore, the EPA should regulate the emissions. And what did that mean? CAFE standards and a whole host of standards that made everything more expensive and work less for you. And me, Tony Katz today. This is a good rollback. This is a good rollback because this finding from an agency, there was no fighting it. This wasn't something that Congress passed. This was a reliance on the concept of something called Chevron deference. Tony Katz today, which is the case of Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council. And what that case said was that you should defer to a federal agency's interpretation of statute put forth by Congress. But it was the Supreme Court back in 2024 that struck down the Chevron ruling, Chevron doctrine or Chevron deference. Very important. And from that, Congress had to do its job again. The agency class, which was not responsible or what's the word? It had to respond to the American people. The agency class, which was allowed to keep itself at arm's length, it didn't have to be answerable. They were now taken far more out of the situation. It was Congress that decided these things. And now the EPA, which said Congress didn't authorize it, we don't have to listen to it, we're not going to. And rescinding this rule is good stuff. Not anti-environment. More very rational.
Literally no other
I think this is Russ
have done this to get at the
Russ.
foundations of the Green New Deal. So tremendously excited that we are where we are today. Great work by Lee. I'm a little worried that this next year will be EPA alone will be dereg east by the number of things that are going to come out of EPA. So great work to the team. $1.3 trillion in savings, massive historical opportunity. Thank you.
By the way, accountable. The agencies are not accountable. Dr. Matt Will texting in and giving me advice.
Today is a historic day led by President Trump's leadership. No other president, as Russ said, would have undertaken this and at the speed we did. It was a great team effort.
This is left's going to go nuts.
Of the Trump administration.
You're going to pay less for a lot of things. And there are a lot of things that we have to do to reduce car costs. This is out of control. I bought a car last week. I should tell that story. I'll get to that tomorrow for sure. More to get to. Keep it here. This is Tony Katz today. Let's bring it back to President Trump real quick.
Where tractors are unbelievably expensive and don't work as well because of all of the environmental nonsense that was put on them. Also excavators, any equipment like that, bulldozers, Caterpillar. Tractor would be a beneficiary, I guess, but the people are going to be a beneficiary because the equipment's going to be a lot less expensive, and it's going to also, most importantly, it's going to work much better. So we're working on that immediately as we speak, and we'll probably make it so that any of that equipment built in the United States will not have to go through this. If it's built outside, I think we'll probably leave the standard the same. If people are going to send us equipment, let them have that standard for whatever it's worth, which is not much. And I think that's a very big announcement too. And we're going to see if we can get that done very quickly so that all of that equipment that we have made, including lawnmowers, et cetera, you won't have to go to the finest schools in the world in order to figure out how to operate it. Okay. So any questions, please?
Thank you for this. And after this much supported move to roll back on former EPA's finding, what additional steps do you plan on taking to scale back what many are calling climate industry scams? Specifically, and Secretary Zeldin knows about these wind turbines they're trying to bring to New York. Judges allowing them to be rebuilt right near your hometown in Jamaica, Queens. They're being called a national security threat air traffic coming into the airport. What could you do to make sure these things
Well,
don't
we're trying to
destroy the
make sure it
environment?
doesn't happen, and we've basically stopped all windmills in this country. It's the most expensive energy you can get. They're all made in China, a little bit in Germany, but mostly in China. And we're putting them all over our fields and ruining the fields and killing the birds and all of this. And the environmentalists say they like them, but they really are a tremendous eyesore. They've ruined. Europe has gone, as you know, Europe isn't even recognizable anymore between immigration and because of, environmental things like the windmills, which are taking over. The people hate them. The energy is by far the most expensive. And we're fighting very hard to make sure that they don't get built. I hope we don't have one built during my administration. We inherited some contracts where they've gone down the line a little bit. We're trying to terminate them for a lot of different reasons. One of the reasons, as you had mentioned, it's endangerment for the military. It's also endangerment for airliners. So we're trying to take care of those situations now. They should have never been allowed in the first place. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for taking
Sure.
questions. What do you tell Americans who are concerned that the $1.3 trillion in savings does come at a cost to public health and the environment based on science?
I tell them, don't worry about it because it has nothing to do with public health. This was all a scam, a giant scam. This was a ripoff of the country by Obama and Biden. And let's say Obama started it and got it rolling. And a terrible ripoff. They'll have more money to spend for healthcare. If you look at it, now they can go out and spend it on something that's meaningful. And nobody's doing more for healthcare than the Republican Party. And that starts with the fact that prescription drugs are going to be coming down at numbers that nobody's ever seen before. They're falling. We were paying the highest prices.
Keep going. I got to get ready for the radio side. I appreciate you guys being here and being a part of it. Just really quick to this question. As President Trump, why Democrats feel they can ignore federal immigration laws? They're Democrats. They feel they can do anything they want to do. And who holds them to account? Right? That's a big part of the story, but we'll get to that. Meanwhile, Tom Homan announcing the leaving of Minneapolis. I've got that whole story coming up. Be sure to listen on the radio side to WIBC.com. I think we'll take a few minutes, try and get the throat a little bit better. Got more radio to get to. I appreciate you guys being here, being a part of what's going on. I'll be back tomorrow at noon. I will catch you then. Oh, and I'm going to the State of the Union. I'll hit that story tomorrow as well. Catch you then, guys. Take care.